Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. What if I told you that the texts of the Bible aren't just ancient theology? They're actually perfectly preserved memories of literal global superpowers, empires that have since been entirely swallowed by the desert. Today, we're unearthing these mighty empires that fundamentally shaped human history. We're going to look at how these massive ancient superpowers influenced the world as we know it today, relying on the absolutely astonishing historical and archaeological evidence dug right up from the sands of time. So it really is one of the greatest mysteries of human history, right? What exactly happened to the mighty empires that once ruled the ancient world? We are talking about absolute global superpowers here, massive kingdoms governed by incredibly powerful rulers who built these sprawling, mysterious cities. And yet, for centuries, these empires just vanished. They were literally swallowed by deserts and pretty much forgotten by time, only living on in ancient manuscripts. Which naturally leads us to a really fascinating question. Could modern archaeological discoveries actually be confirming stories that were recorded thousands of years ago? I mean, when you read about these towering walls, epic sieges, and massive exiles in ancient texts, it is so easy to wonder just how much of it is actually grounded in historical reality. Well, as you'll see today, the ground right under our feet has actually been holding on to some truly astonishing answers. So, why do the ruins of places like Babylon, Egypt, and Assyria still fascinate millions of us today? Like, why do we even care? Well, the absolutely crucial point here is this. To truly understand ancient texts like the Bible, we have to first understand the civilizations that surrounded them. These texts didn't just pop up in a vacuum. They were deeply shaped by the politics, the geography, and the cultures of the absolute greatest empires of antiquity. Here is our roadmap for tracing this relentless cycle of rising and falling empires. We're starting way back around 3000 BCE with Sumer and the cradle of civilization, moving right through the Egyptian era, hitting the absolute dominance of Assyria and Babylon around 700 BCE, following the Persian restoration around 500 BCE, and finally landing in the 1st century CE with the sprawling Roman Empire. Part 1. The Mystery of Lost Empires, Mesopotamia and the World of Abraham. Our story kicks off perfectly between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, right in the cradle of civilization. Now, dominating the skyline of ancient Sumerian cities like Ur were these massive, towering step pyramids called ziggurats. And these weren't just monuments, they were the absolute epicenters of daily life, religion, and early writing. It's kind of mind-blowing when you realize that this highly advanced, bustling trade hub is the exact world from which the biblical figure of Abraham is said to have migrated. Truly understanding this deep Mesopotamian context just brings those early migration stories completely to life. But what happened next? Let's move to part 2. Egypt and Canaan's rise, pharaohs and the Promised Land. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it grounds these overlapping historical empires with their corresponding geographic centers and key biblical figures. As power shifted westward toward the monumental pyramids and the incredible wealth of the Nile River, we see exactly how geography drove destiny. Egypt, anchored right by the Nile, connects directly to the eras of Joseph and Moses. Later on, Babylon dominates the Euphrates, giving us the backdrop for Daniel. And then Persia, under Cyrus the Great, makes its massive impact felt all the way over in Jerusalem. So geography wasn't just some passive backdrop here, it was literally the main driver of these historical narratives. And sitting squarely in the middle of all these massive empires was Canaan. So why did this specific region become the absolute geographic center of biblical history? Simply put, it was a highly contested crossroads. If Egypt wanted to trade with or attack Mesopotamia, their armies had to march right through Canaan. Because of that, daily life in this region was defined by constant military tension. That's exactly why you see these heavily fortified, walled cities like Jericho, Hazor, and Megiddo. Geopolitically speaking, it wasn't just a promised land. It was the most valuable, heavily trafficked land bridge in the ancient world. Part 3. Assyria and Babylon's Might, the Age of Brutal Empires. We are now dealing with the absolute heavyweights of the era. A whole new mystery emerges here, because the sheer scale of what happened next changed the ancient world forever. On one side, you've got the Assyrian Empire, centered in the sprawling city of Nineveh. They were known for this terrifying, unprecedented military power. They were historically responsible for the destruction of ancient Israel and served as the menacing backdrop for the biblical story of Jonah. But then, on the other side, you have the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar. They were a conquering force, responsible for the great exile of the Judean people, which is exactly where the story of Daniel takes place. Yet, at the very same time, Babylon built a center of unparalleled cultural greatness. I mean, they were home to the legendary Hanging Gardens. So, two brutal empires, but two very different legacies. Part 4. Persia to the Roman era. Restoration and the world of Jesus. Let's move to and see how this builds, because most people really don't realize just how dramatically the Persian Empire changed the course of biblical history. Instead of ruling by pure terror and destruction like the empires before them, Cyrus the Great implemented a truly brilliant administrative strategy. Step 1. He connects his empire using a sophisticated network of Persian roads. Step 2. He institutes this unprecedented policy of tolerance, allowing captive peoples to actually return home. And this leads directly to the return from the Babylonian exile and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And that sets the stage perfectly for Step 3. Centuries later, the massive Roman Empire takes over. By the time we reach the 1st century, Judea is deeply embedded in this Roman world, which means heavy taxation, Roman roads, and King Herod's monumental building projects. This is the exact, historically verifiable world into which Jesus was born. Could archaeologists actually confirm this? Let's look at Part 5, Unearthing Biblical Archaeology, the Evidence Revealed. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer volume of evidence we have today. For a long time, historians really only had ancient texts to rely on. But as we've dusted off these completely forgotten worlds, the discoveries have been nothing short of staggering. We aren't just guessing anymore. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest surviving copies of biblical manuscripts. We physically excavated the massive ruins of Babylon, actually read the Assyrian military inscriptions detailing their conquests, and uncovered ancient royal seals. We've even literally dug up the massive stone fortifications of biblical cities like Jericho and Hazor. Archaeology doesn't just illuminate ancient history, it firmly grounds these long-lost stories in a tangible physical reality. So as we look back over this epic journey, from the ziggurats of Sumer all the way to the Roman roads of Judea, a pretty profound truth emerges. Empires rise, empires fall. The pharaohs, the kings, the emperors, they all built these monumental cities, thinking their reign would just last forever. But while their immense political power eventually crumbled into dust, the underlying human and biblical stories continued across all of them. They survived the rise and fall of every single superpower, and in doing so, permanently shaped human history. Which brings us to our final thought today. The stones of these ancient civilizations may be silent today, but their stories still speak. The ancient world isn't really lost, we just have to know how to look for it. So if you enjoyed exploring these ancient powers with us today, think about which of these civilizations fascinated you the absolute most. What forgotten kingdom or ancient mystery would you like this explainer to uncover next? Thanks for joining me on this incredibly focused journey through time, and keep seeking out the stories hidden within the stones.